Is a PowerPoint presentation for Chapter 19, Blood Vessels. So really, blood vessels are the plumbing of the body. It's the pipes that are part of circulation. They carry the blood from the heart out to the structures, to the tissues, and then carry the blood back to the heart, out to the lungs, etc. So, by definition, blood vessels that carry blood away from the heart are called arteries. And veins are the ones that carry blood towards the heart. Capillaries really are the vessels of exchange. This is where the gases get on and off, the nutrients get on and off. So it's exchanged with the tissues, and it happens mostly by diffusion. We touched on it in respiratory when we talked about internal respiration. Contrary to popular belief, the arteries don't carry oxygenated blood. They carry blood away from the heart. Now, in the case of systemic circulation, going from the left ventricle of the heart out to the tissues of the body, then it's true. There's oxygen rich blood in the arteries, and there's oxygen poor blood in the veins. In pulmonary circulation, however, it's the other way around. The oxygen rich is in the veins, and the oxygen poor is in the arteries. So this is a slide on systemic circulation. All blood vessels have fairly complicated walls. They have things that are called tunics. There's three layers. One's called the tunica intima or the tunica interna. One's called the tunica media, that's the one in the middle, and then the tunica externa or tunica adventitia. This is an interesting slide in that it's generally, if you call one the tunica intima, you should call the outside one the tunica adventitia. If you call the inside one tunica interna, then you should call the outside one tunica externa. It's not that big a deal. Just realize that there are a couple of different names. The center space in a blood vessel where the blood flows is called the lumen. It's really just an opening. The lumen of any tube is the opening in the center of the tube. In capillaries, you are going to see that really the tunica media and the tunica adventitia or externa are very, very sparse. There's hardly anything there. So it's really veins and arteries that have the tunics. If you look at these pictures, you'll see that there's a couple of things. One of the things is that the tunica intima is, in both veins and arteries, is made up of an endothelium, a simple squamous epithelium, that lines the lumen, and it's filled with tight junctions and desmosomes, etc. And then it is supported by a subendothelial layer. It's a connective tissue layer that supports the endothelium. In arteries, there's some elastic tissue in the connective tissue that is a little bit away from the lumen, so a little surrounding the subendothelial layer, and that gives kind of a rubberiness, an elastic to the artery. It's generally not found in veins. The middle layer is the tunica media. In both arteries and veins, it's smooth muscle and some elastic fibers. There tends to be two layers of smooth muscle. There's a longitudinal layer and a circular layer. You'll notice that in the arteries, the media is much thicker than in veins. It's a much more dynamic thing in the arteries than in the veins. Arteries also have, in the tunica media, an external elastic lamina, a layer of more elastic tissue. Then the tunica externa, or adventitia, is really a connective tissue sheath that it all rides in. It's what attaches it to the tissues that it passes through. Capillaries that you'll see really are an endothelium and a basement membrane. And there are some small cells that really kind of make up an adventitia or an externa called pericytes. We'll talk about them a little bit later. So the endothelium that is really a simple squamous epithelium, and it's the tunica intima. Intima meaning right next to. The tunica media, smooth muscle, some elastin. The smooth muscle is really innervated by the sympathetic and or by the autonomic nervous system. We'll leave it at that. So the adventitia is collagen fibers, and it's quite large. Now, interestingly, some of the big arteries and the big veins, like the aorta, the vena cava, usually the large named arteries actually have blood vessels that supply the walls of the tunica media, and they're called the vasa vasorum, which means the vessels of the vessels. They act pretty much like the coronary arteries do in the heart, except they supply the tunica media of these large blood vessels, because the large blood vessels, because of the endothelium, don't actually have the ability to get nutrients or oxygen from the blood that is in the lumen. So in the arteries, they start out very large. They start out as the aorta, as one very large artery, and then large branches come off that. And all of these are elastic. The tunica media has a lot of elastic fiber, and the walls of the blood vessels are thick and elastic, and they really are about pressure reservoir and that kind of thing. They have the consistency of overcooked calamari. They have that kind of rubbery texture. They're quite large, and they carry a lot of blood. There's relatively fewer of them. The smaller arteries branching off of these elastic arteries are called the distributing arteries, or the muscular arteries. The muscular arteries really have a lot more smooth muscle in their tunica media, and they're really used to control the flow, because these are the ones that vasodilate and vasoconstrict. Just coming into the capillary beds are very, very small arteries called arterioles. They really don't have a lot, but they do have a muscular wall so that they can vasoconstrict. They act like valves to the capillary beds. You can increase or decrease flow very easily. Witness blushing. Blushing is when the arterioles vasodilate and more flow can go to the skin of the face. Capillaries are very small, and there's not much to them. The capillaries feed into small veins called venules, and then the larger vessels are called veins. Now, veins, if we go back to this slide here, all have special things in the endothelium called valves, and they make veins really be a one-way flow. They because these are low pressure vessels and they flow only towards the heart, that flow is maintained by these valves. Relatively little smooth muscle, because we don't use them to really vasodilate or vasoconstrict very much. So these elastic arteries, the large ones, are also called the conducting arteries, because what they do is they bring blood to the various areas. So off of the aorta, there are major elastic branches that go to the head and neck called the brachiocephalic. There's ones that go to the arm. There's the carotid arteries that go to the head and neck. The one that goes to the arm is the subclavian, because it passes under the clavicle. There are major arteries that go to the various organ systems, down into the legs. The common iliac arteries are all considered elastic. And they have very large lumens, and there's not very much resistance because of them. And they act as pressure reservoirs. These are the ones that you can actually feel a pulse in, because when the heart is in systole, it's actively contracting, the pressure goes up and the walls of the blood vessel expand. When the heart is in diastole, the pressure goes down, and the elasticity of the artery actually causes it to compress on the blood and maintain the blood pressure. You all know that I'm sure that you've all used a garden hose. When you shut the water off at the tap with a garden hose, the hose keeps on running for a few seconds longer. It's not because of the length of the hose, it's because of the elasticity in the hose. If you have a pipe, like a rigid pipe, and you do the same thing, you shut off the force, you shut off the tap, then the water stops immediately, but not so in a garden hose. What happens in a garden hose is that when you turn the pressure on, part of the pressure pushes water out of the hose, but part of the pressure actually expands the elasticity of the hose itself. You can feel it. The hose becomes more rigid in your hand. It actually expands a little bit. When you shut the water off at the tap, then what happens is the elasticity of the hose itself compresses the water in the lumen and maintains the pressure for a little bit longer and keeps the flow up. And that's what we're trying to do with the elastic arteries, so that the blood keeps on flowing even when the heart is in diastole. The elasticity of the artery maintains that flow, because it maintains the pressure by compressing the blood in the lumen. The distributing arteries, the muscular arteries, are muscular walled, and they distribute blood to the different organs. They are the ones that are very active in vasoconstriction, vasodilation. So it really controls where the blood flows at any given time. So, for instance, when you've had a big meal, there's dilation in the blood vessels to your digestive system, and more blood flows to the digestive system. When you're nervous or afraid, then those blood vessels to those distributing arteries to the digestive system constrict, and you don't send any blood, which is why you get nauseated. The arterioles are the small little ones. They lead to the capillary beds, and they control flow into the capillary beds. Capillaries are really very, very small. they really consist of a tunica intima, and that's about it. There's a few cells that help stabilize the walls of them. They're called pericytes. Peri meaning around, site meaning cell. They control the permeability. They are not, well, I guess they are the rudiments of the adventitia, the tunica externa. The lumen of these are so small that capillaries only, the lumen is about the size of the diameter of a red blood cell. So really, red blood cells pass through capillaries in single file. So they go through one at a time, which is pretty amazing when you consider how many red blood cells we have, and the fact that at rest, all the blood in your body passes through the heart and through all the capillaries. So yes, these are very small. If you think of the circulatory system in terms of plumbing, the elastic arteries are like the water main coming into the house. And the big pipes that go off to each of the bathrooms and the kitchen and the laundry room, the major branches. The distributing arteries are is like the pipes that branch off and go to each of the things. So in the kitchen, it's the ones that the pipes that go to the dishwasher or to the sink or to the water maker in the refrigerator if you have one. In a bathroom, it goes the ones that go to the toilet and to the sink and to the shower and to the tub. Those would all be distributing arteries. And you'll note that on those distributing arteries, we have valves that control the flow where we want it, so that we can open them up or close them down as we need. Capillaries are where the action actually happens. So capillaries would be the shower head or the sink or the toilet or the bathtub or the dishwasher. It's the place where the water gets used. So capillaries are the place where the blood gets used. The veins really are akin to the drain pipes. So each drain pipe comes together and comes together and comes together until there's one major drain, one major sewer drain that leaves the house and goes out to the road. It's the same. The analogy is quite valid. So capillaries are these exchange places. That's where the blood gets used. We find them in almost all tissues. Any tissue that's not avascular, so all the vascularized tissue have capillary beds. So the avascular tissues really are cartilage and epithelia, and in the eye, the cornea and the lens of the eye. Pretty much everything else is vascularized to some extent and will have capillaries. So we leave the heart through elastic arteries, which branch into the distributing muscular arteries, which then branch into the arterioles, which then feed the capillary beds. The capillary beds is where exchange happens. The blood is then picked up by the venules, the postcapillary venules, which then flow into small veins, which flow into bigger veins, which flow into even bigger veins, which then go back to the heart.